Welcome. Today we will delve into the dark depths of World War II to uncover the hidden side of heroism, which is still considered sacred canon. The war, in which every aerial battle seemed to be a fight between good and evil, conceals behind its facade incredible moral dilemmas and human tragedies. Imagine a German ace with 22 victories, ready for new heights of fame, facing an act of mercy that could overturn all notions of heroism. At the same time, an American pilot, armed with patriotism and hope, risks not only his life but also his morality. Why do traditional versions of events fail to explain the full truth about the internal struggle unfolding on the fronts? What happens when duty clashes with compassion? And who truly commands this war? Heroes or people seeking meaning amid chaos? In this investigation, we will combine these fragments to show that the reality of war is much more complex and frightening than it appears at first glance. Are you ready to see what lies behind epic battles and medals? Then let's begin. World War II is an era forever etched in human memory as a century of heroic feats, strategic brilliance, and tragic losses. The greatness of this conflict, its scale and nature, are shaped not only by front lines and battle maps, but also by a cultural canon that elevates the image of the heroic pilot, a warrior fighting for his country with unparalleled courage and determination. This canon includes air battles as the most vivid episodes of the war, which have become forever embedded in consciousness as symbols of victory, bravery, and selfless service. These stories about heroes, pilots flying in the sky who, despite fear, fatigue, and mortal danger, continued to fight, created a cultural myth wrapped in an aura of heroism. These myths set a standard that generations strive to emulate, whether consciously or subconsciously, acknowledging that behind them lie not only facts but also deep human feelings, moral dilemmas, and internal conflicts. Let us recall how these events unfolded. In the early 1940s, when the darkness of Nazism covered Europe, the German Luftwaffe seemed invincible. In the early years of the war, its aircraft, the Messerschmitt Bf-109 and Focke-Wulf Fw-190, dominated the skies, like shadows of terrifying monsters, destroying everything in their path. In these aerial battles, which formed the main theater of combat, pilots became heroes, whose agility, skill, and impeccable combat spirit turned the sky into an arena of glory. Enemies, German aces, achieved 20 or more victories. Their awards, the Knight's Cross and other honors, became symbols of personal heroism. They were heroes celebrated in newspapers, films, and historical chronicles. American pilots, in turn, were heroes trained not only to fly, but also to believe in their mission and patriotism. Part 2 of 14. In their units, not only skill was valued, but also cohesion, team spirit, and faith in victory. The Allies' strategy, to destroy Germany's industry through massive bombing, was aimed not only at physically destroying the enemy, but also at demoralizing the population and breaking the moral foundations of the enemy. In these battles, the prevailing idea was that the enemy was a faceless force, and heroism was winning at any cost, even at the expense of human lives. It was within this context that the canon was created, a heroic struggle, victory over the enemy, as an absolute good. But is it really so simple and straightforward to perceive these events? Why do traditional notions of heroism and victory, shaped by mass culture, fail to reveal the full complexity of moral decisions that a person must face in the heat of battle? Why do heroic portraits conceal stories of fear, doubt, compassion, moments when a person faces a choice, to fulfill their duty or to show mercy? Questions that go beyond idealized images require deep analysis. The reality of war is not only the triumph of heroism, it is a place where human morality is subjected to harsh tests. When a pilot flying into the chaos of battle sees not only the enemy, but also a fellow human being with shared feelings, fears, and hopes, what does he do? When faced with the necessity to destroy a civilian city, to wreck infrastructure in order to break the enemy's will, does he always realize the full depth of his actions? Inner conflict, torment of conscience, fear for one's life and the lives of those he protects, all of this is hidden behind heroic portraits. And if the plane is shot down and the person is left alone in the abyss of the sky, surrounded by enemies, with the feeling that he is just a small part of a vast machinery of war, where do his feelings, patriotism, fear, compassion, despair, originate from then? And what was it like to make decisions when every move could be the last, and every word the final farewell? This chapter is not just a story about air battles and heroes. It is an attempt to understand what lies behind the facade of the heroic myth. Why is it so easy to admire feats of heroism, but so difficult to grasp the full moral complexity behind them? Why is the history of war often presented as a sequence of victories and defeats, forgetting human destinies? The fact that behind every hero there were not only awards, but also internal suffering, doubts, and choices between duty and compassion. After all, true history is not only facts and figures, but human destinies, experiences, and internal struggles. And it is precisely in these contradictions that the meaning is hidden, meaning that we often ignore when we admire only the external image of heroism. After all, what does a person do when their moral principles clash with the harsh reality of war? When duty demands destruction, but the heart desires compassion. These internal conflicts are an integral part of the human fate in war. They transform the hero not only into a winner, but also into a person fighting his inner demons. After all, this is the true complexity of war, the contradiction between external heroism and internal humanity, between duty and compassion, between ideals and the reality that war itself often creates. It is these contradictions that raise the main question of this story. What to do when notions of heroism clash with real human lives? At the heart of aerial battles, where destinies are decided by centimeters and moments, there is a figure who seems to embody the ideal German ace, Franz Stigler. A young pilot with 22 confirmed victories, he was not just a shooter, not just a pilot. He was a symbol of bravery, precision, and an impeccable combat reputation. His name echoed in radio broadcasts as a synonym for ruthless efficiency, and his aircraft, the legendary Messerschmitt Bf 109, seemed an extension of his own personality. Elegant, fast, deadly. But behind this mask of fearless ace hid an inner struggle that could destroy even the strongest person. Franz Stigler was a figure who, during the war years, came to symbolize not only professionalism, but also internal conflict. He was young, ambitious, craving fame, and his desire to reach 30 victories became for him not just a goal, but a moral duty. This number, not just another achievement, not just an award, became a symbol of overcoming personal and professional trials. Every down plane, every victory was a reminder that he was still alive, capable of overcoming all difficulties, that his name would forever be recorded in the chronicles of the Luftwaffe. But he could not forget his brother, who fell in battle for the same glory, for the same duty. His death was like a shadow hanging over each of his flights, pushing him toward new heights, new victories, new fame, to justify both his personal tragedy and his professional mission. The time when these events unfold is April 1943, when the sky over Europe was boiling with air battles. Hundreds of aircraft fought in the air, their engines roaring like wild beasts, and bullets whistled, slicing through the silence of early morning hours. In this chaos, among clouds and fire, Franz Stigler flew as if following a score, demonstrating mastery and composure. His reputation was an undeniable fact, confirmed by witnesses and evidence of his accurate hits and cool maneuvers. He listened to radio broadcasts, followed news of battles, drew inspiration from personal achievements and how his name sounded among other aces. In his heart grew the belief that each victory was not only a personal achievement, but also a contribution to Germany's glory, its power, and might. The pursuit of 30 victories was for Stigler not just an ambitious goal. It was his personal duty, his way to justify the losses he had endured. His brother, also a pilot, fell in battle, and this loss became a powerful motivator, a reminder of the cost of glory and the necessity of achieving it at any price. Every new aerial confrontation turned into a test for him, not only of his skill, but also of his spirit, of his ability to maintain humanity amidst war. After all, what remains of a person when surrounded by death, destruction, and the ruthless need to fight for every breath? Can a person driven by a thirst for fame and revenge preserve their moral integrity and principles? Or, under the pressure of war, does one become a soulless machine, a closed door through which no human compassion can pass? This question is the central conflict hidden behind the mask of a hero. Inside Franz Stigler, a struggle unfolds between his personal ambition and the demands of conscience. He seems to walk a fine line, where each flight and each shot-down plane is a step toward glory, but also a risk of losing himself, his humanity, his inner self. The internal changes happening to him under the constant pressure of war are not only a physical fight on the front, but also a spiritual battle that could end either in complete destruction or inner awakening. And it is this struggle that holds the key to understanding what Franz Stigler ultimately became: a hero or a victim, a human or a machine created by war. In this context, in this drama, arises a question that haunts. What happens inside an ace when he faces a moral choice? When the moment finally comes to decide whether to continue chasing glory at the risk of losing all that is human, or to stop and ask himself, what am I doing and why? These internal changes are not just psychological nuances. They are the core of his fate, his personal tragedy, his struggle to save his soul amid the chaos of war. The internal conflict, where every victory is simultaneously a step toward fame, and the price of the human self, becomes the central motif, revealing not only the personality of Franz Stigler, but also the complex, layered fabric of war itself. After all, what remains after all this fighting? What internal changes occur in an ace when he must choose between glory and conscience? What values does he keep inside when the window of opportunity closes and the choice becomes a matter of life and death? These questions are not only about him, they concern everyone who has ever faced a moral dilemma in extreme circumstances. And it is precisely in this contradiction, in this struggle, that the entire essence of the tragedy of a person caught in the bloody whirlwind of war is hidden. This is the story of Franz Stigler, an ace who, despite his unparalleled bravery and skill, found himself facing the most important and difficult battle, the battle for his soul. And how will he emerge from it? Will he remain a hero, or will he become a victim of his own ambitions and inner demons? Time will tell. But for the observer, for the one witnessing this dramatic journey, there remains only one question. Will the person who preserves their humanity win more strongly, or the one who succumbs to inner darkness in pursuit of fame? In the dark, tense silence of the command headquarters, where only the flickering lamp illuminated the faces of the officers, a new chapter in history was beginning. A young commander, Charlie Brown, with a slightly wary look, who had recently completed his first combat mission, stood among other pilots, his heart pounding faster. His gaze was focused. He knew that today he would become part of a decisive step that would determine the fate not only of himself, but of the entire front. The silence in the room was piercing. Everyone understood that danger lay ahead, a danger that could not be told from hearsay. Their task was to prepare for the raid on Bremen, to destroy the German WWII factory, a crucial element of the Third Reich's military industry. And this preparation was to become both their shield and their weapon. 2 months of intense, meticulous training in distant Texas, in a place called Pyote, became their starting point. There, amidst endless desert expanses, pilots and their crews found their confidence, sharpened their skills, and learned not only to fly, but to think as a single unit. Each training session was filled with simulations of combat conditions, night raids, technical failures, complex maneuvers. They repeated every move until it became automatic, so that in real combat situations, there would be no room for errors. This training was their armor, their hope for survival. But preparation was not only about drills and technique. In the headquarters, at command positions, Colonel Maurice Preston, commander of the 8th Air Force, was present, whose voice was both authoritative and instructive. His words sounded like orders, clear, precise, restrained. He explained tactical nuances, emphasized the importance of recognizing aircraft, both Allied and German. Particular attention was paid to the new American P-51 Mustangs, which were to become their shield against the deadly German F. In a world where death could be lurking around every corner, every pilot had to know how to act in the most hopeless situations. Not only technical knowledge played a crucial role, but also personal courage. And as is well known, courage is not born in calmness, but is forged in conditions of extreme risk, in a constant state of readiness for battle. But the main question remained: how prepared were these newcomers for real danger? How would they face death when confronted face-to-face with German fighters? In their hearts there was a mixture of fear and determination, doubt and inner strength. They are living witnesses to an era when every decision could be their last. They are children of war, thrown into the very furnace of battle, where each second could be their final. And although their experience was limited, their eyes burned with a desire to survive, to prove their bravery, to become part of a great operation that could turn the tide of the war. But what was at stake? What were the chances for these young, inexperienced pilots when faced with the deadly precision of German aircraft? Their training was but a thin thread between safety and death. Every step they took, every decision, was a gamble with their own fate and the fate of the entire mission. In this dramatic confrontation, in this struggle for survival, strategy was intertwined with personal bravery, which, despite everything, had to become their main weapon. This is the core meaning. In conditions of extreme risk, in a world where death is a constant companion, strategic preparation and personal courage merge into one. Can young pilots, who have not yet completed their full combat training, become true fighters? How long can their confidence in themselves and their commanders withstand the enemy's onslaught? What forces, strategic, tactical, and internal, will help them endure this hell? The answers to these questions are not only proof of their professionalism, but also an indication that it is personal bravery, supported by carefully thought-out training, that can extract the maximum from the most critical situations. For it is precisely in such conditions of utmost risk that the true face of heroes is revealed. Strategic training is the foundation, the bedrock upon which hope is built. But without inner strength, without the resolve to go to the end, even the most well-planned strategy will turn into an empty sound. And these pilots, these novices, can become heroes in an instant or become part of the statistics. Risk is their constant companion, and courage is their only shield. And only their personal determination, their ability to overcome fear and make the right choice, depends not only on the outcome of the raid, but also on their own fate. So, when all preparations are complete, when night has fallen on the airfield, and the stars illuminate the sky like witnesses to the upcoming battle, there remains only one question. How prepared are these young people to face real danger? And how can their inner strength, their faith in victory, and their courage withstand the looming shadow of death? Time will tell, but their fate is already written in facts and witnesses, in strategies and fears, in decisions made at the last moment. In this battle, where risk is an inherent part of every wingbeat, their personal bravery and preparation merge into one, and only this will determine who emerges victorious from this fight, and who will remain forever in the shadow of oblivion. Deep in the sky, at the very heart of the fiercest battle, unfolds one of the most tense episodes of this combat raid. It is morning, when the sun is just beginning to break through the clouds, illuminating the distant horizon. On board a bomber, which fate has already prepared for a severe test, tense silence reigns. In an instant, as if on command from an unseen commander, the airspace is shattered by the sounds of approaching engine roars and the whistling of missile tracers. At 11 o'clock and 5 minutes in the morning, like a shadow crossing the border between safety and death, enemy bombers cross the European coast. Their silhouette, pale but threatening, flickers on the horizon as they streak over fields, villages, and rusty fences, serving as a reminder of the impending danger. At this moment, when the illusion of calm still persists, pilots feel the enemy is already nearby, and its presence is sensed with every breath, every nervous movement of the control stick. Moment after moment, time seems to stretch as the crew on board observes the approaching nightmare, realizing that each of their takeoffs is a risk, each action a matter of life or death. At this exact moment, when the clock shows 11:32, the first strike occurs. The rumble of explosions like thunderclaps echoes through the cabins. High explosive shells fired by German anti-aircraft guns, and the first German fighters cut through the air like blades, their strikes hitting their targets. The first salvo, like a hammer blow shattering glass, breaks the illusion of safety. Metal tracers, shining in the sun, carve through the air, and at this moment, a bloody struggle begins. The aircraft, like a vulnerable beast, lifts a wing under a powerful hit. Penetrations cause a fire that quickly engulfs its metal hull. Flames, bright and menacing, rapidly spread, turning the cockpit into a blazing hell. Inside, screams, noise, the sounds of cracking systems and metal parts tearing under the onslaught of fire. Engine failure, like a blow of fate, strips the aircraft of its ability to continue flying and escape the danger zone. Despite catastrophic damage, the crew fights for control. They know their mission is not just to drop bombs, but to accomplish their task at any cost. Inside the cockpit, a struggle for control and survival unfolds. Evidence shows that pilots and bombers, despite destruction, continue to fight for survival, carrying out their bombing runs despite the approaching threats. Soon, with the approach of German fighters, the situation becomes critical. Two FW-190s, like predators in the night, race toward their target, a shot-down or damaged bomber. Their goal is clear: to shoot down or to hold it in place. In conditions where every moment could be the last, the crew begins a desperate fight for control. Evasive maneuvers, sharp turns, attempts to jettison excess weight, all of this turns into a choreography of death. Chaos reigns inside the cockpit as pilots use every possible means, even dangerous ones like ramming or spinning maneuvers, to shake off their pursuers. Their hearts beat in rhythm with each explosion, each enemy advance. At this moment, when it seems all is lost, the crew makes a fateful decision: to continue the raid and try to complete the mission to the end, or to jettison part of the bombs to increase their chances of survival. And then, at the most critical moment, when everything appears to be lost, the main question hangs in the air like heavy fog. Can the damaged and exhausted bombers survive this deadly game? Will they, despite the destruction, accomplish their task? Or is death already on their wings, ready to seize them by the throat? This question becomes not only a matter of tactics, but also an inner struggle for each pilot. What is more valuable, completing the mission or their own life? What is more important, following orders taken in the name of victory or saving oneself to see the next dawn? In this battle, in this fight for the sky, the line between life and death is blurred, and the fate of each crew hangs on a thin thread. It is under these conditions, amidst clouds of smoke, fire, and the roar of explosions, that the main moral dilemma of this story is born. In conditions of mortal danger, what is more important? Resilience and mission execution, or the instinct of self-preservation? What is more precious? Fulfilling one's duty, even at the cost of one's own life, or retreating for salvation? In a world where every moment could be the last, these questions become not just philosophical, but questions of life and death, demanding answers here and now, with no room for error. In that fateful April of 1943, when the sky over Europe was filled with smoke and the roar of combat machines, and the air was thick with the smell of burnt fuel and scorched engines, the fates of pilots merged into a single stream of danger and despair. At the center of this dramatic scene was Franz Stigler, a Luftwaffe pilot, member of the elite JG-27 unit, a fighter whose reputation grew with each victory. His aircraft, the famous Messerschmitt Bf-109, like a noble predator, was an extension of himself, his weapon, his pride. He already had 22 confirmed kills behind him, and in his heart burned a desire to reach 30, a number promising fame, recognition, and a place in history. He was returning from another combat mission, his gear filled with a sense of duty fulfilled. But inside, there was another ember, an irresistible urge to prove his invincibility. When he landed at the base, his gaze often turned to the sky, to the clouds where his comrades had recently fought, where they had flown and perished. In the air, over the radio, short messages were transmitted about losses, successes, new targets. And on that day, at the moment when he was just about to refuel and repair his aircraft, his attention was suddenly drawn to an unusual radio station. He heard a message that immediately stirred a wave of interest and anxiety within him. It spoke of a damaged American bomber, one of those massive, heavy, flying fortresses, the B-17s, that were becoming symbols of American power and invincibility with each passing day. But what was especially striking were the details about its condition. The plane was in a critical state, with systems breached, crew members lost. Evidence indicated that this fighter, this giant, had not been destroyed, and perhaps it could still fly, could still fight for its life and its crew. Glancing around, Franz noticed that "ye old pub," as it was jokingly called due to its outdated appearance, was one of the most battered and worn out of its comrades, standing nearby. Its metal shell was broken, the fuselage torn, the glass shattered, and inside, silence, which seemed more ominous than any battle noise. The damage was deep, the wounds fresh and bleeding. He saw breached systems, debris scattered across the deck, and the crew's figures frozen, ghosts of fallen heroes. These signs of pain and suffering could not leave him indifferent. He understood that before him was not just a dead aircraft, but a living symbol of the tragedy unfolding on the front. At that moment, his heart clenched, and an internal struggle arose within him. Simultaneously, news about a mission was coming through the radio. They spoke of the need to drop bombs, of the strategic importance of this action, of the order to destroy remaining enemies and their supplies. But in the voice, there was also a note of despair and anxiety, for it was about people, living people caught in a trap, in mortal danger. This conflict between duty and compassion became an internal test for Franz. He listened as opposing feelings clashed in his mind. On one side, the necessity to follow orders, duty to the motherland and comrades. On the other, the desire to save, to protect, to show mercy. He understood that at this moment, in this patch of sky, not only the fate of the aircraft or crew was at stake, but the very essence of his human nature. When he first saw the damaged bomber, a scene unfolded before his eyes that could have been a scene from a tragic play. The enormous, shattered craft hung in the air like a dying giant, its fuselage cracking under the wind's pressure, liquids seeping from breached systems, leaving traces of destruction behind. Inside, silence, and only a faint hum, like the moan of dying life. At that moment, a desire took hold, either to destroy it, end its suffering, and deliver a final verdict, or, conversely, to attempt to save it. There was no indifference. There was no simple choice. There was only a feeling that behind this decision lay something greater than just an order. It was a moral challenge, an internal test, a trial of humanity. Franz's motivation at that moment was not merely a desire to prove his bravery, not only a duty to his command, but also a profound longing to leave a mark of humanity. Two feelings battled within his soul: the desire to assert his strength, his invincibility, to prove that he was the best pilot, that his victories were not mere chance, that he deserved fame. At the same time, there was a desire to protect those still alive, those fighting for their survival, those who might still be saved. He felt the pressure of command demanding the destruction of enemy targets, and simultaneously, the voice of conscience whispering, "Perhaps there is another way." The time was April, mid-spring, when the war reached its climax. In the air hung the sense that every takeoff, Every battle was not just a fight for territory, but a struggle for the human soul, for the ability to maintain humanity amidst chaos and destruction. The central conflict in this story was not only about tactics or strategy, it was about the inner struggle of a person driven by ambition and duty, on one side, and genuine human compassion on the other. Could a person, obeying orders and the demands of the military machine, show mercy? Could he, at a moment when victory seemed to depend solely on strength and brutality, stop and think about the fate of living beings caught in the trap of war? This question haunted Franz. It pierced his heart and mind, becoming his internal trial. In every movement, every glance, every breath, this dilemma echoed. Fight or save, destroy or rescue. And at this crossroads of fate, in this moment when not only the outcome of the battle, but also the fate of his own humanity was decided, the main question was born. What wins in a person? The desire for glory or compassion? This story is not just about war or technology, not only about airplanes and strategies. It is about the inner world of each of us, about what makes us human, and about how we choose to show our humanity in the face of inhumane war. Time seems to stand still, leaving only this one final, decisive moment. Who will prevail? Pride and ambition, or mercy and compassion? On that fateful night, when the whistle of bullets and explosions, when the roar of bombs shattered the silence of the sky, it seemed that there was no room for mercy in the heart of war. But precisely at that moment, in the very epicenter of chaos and destruction, a scene unfolded that would forever remain in the memory of those who witnessed this contradictory act of human kindness and courage. Franz Stigler, a German pilot whose fate had become entangled in the knots of a global war, at that moment was no longer just a participant in a fight. He became a witness to his own inner struggle, an internal conflict that could determine not only his fate, but also the fate of the ye olde pub crew. Imagine, the night sky shrouded in a black veil, with rare stars flickering like beacons of hope and despair at the same time. In the distance, the hum of engines approaching their target can be heard, while inside Stigler's cabin, tension is taut, like a string stretched to its limit. His eyes fixate on a damaged, wounded figure, the crew of the ye olde pub, whose combat ships are hopelessly damaged and whose lives hang by a thread. Confronting this scenario is not just another point on the battlefield map. It is a clash of souls. Franz sees blood, shattered windows, wounded and shocked people who, despite everything, fight for their lives. He notices that the tail machine gun, the main defensive mechanism, is destroyed, meaning the crew is deprived of the ability to defend themselves effectively. An inner voice, a conscience, tears at him. He understands. Further, either death or mercy. There is no room for easy decisions in this choice. In this moment, the fate of millions hangs in the balance. Deep inside, in the heart of this pilot, a conflict ignites that cannot be ignored. He knows his duty is to destroy the enemy, to obey orders, to follow military discipline. But his gaze is clouded not only by adrenaline and fear, but also by awareness of what it means to be human in such hell. As if in slow motion, he approaches the ye olde pub. His eyes catch the bloodstains, blood on the hull, wounds on the faces of those still alive but unable to speak. At this moment, it seems as if time stands still. He sees that the crew are not enemies in the full sense, but living people, wounded, frightened, and shaken, as if lost in this madness. And at this critical moment, when everything seems predetermined, he makes a decision that radically changes everything. He does not shoot. He does not destroy. He offers a gesture, a sign of respect and mercy. It is not just a gesture. It is an act of inner strength, an act of humanity capable of overcoming all military laws and strict orders. As his hand slowly rises to signal peace, the ye olde pub crew notices this gesture. Their eyes fill with surprise and recognition. They see in him not an enemy, but a person who, despite all circumstances, has preserved his humanity. In this look, all the horror and all the greatness of this moment, they recognize in him someone capable of understanding their suffering, someone who can place humanity above orders. At this moment, an invisible thread forms between them, connecting two worlds, the world of war and the world of compassion. The crew, shaken yet grateful, recognizes in their enemy not just a pilot, but a human being. Franz, raising his hand in greeting, salutes, showing the whole world, even in the darkest corners of war, there is room for respect and mercy. His gesture is a challenge to the entire brutal world that forgets the human face in war. This act becomes a symbol of the contradiction that permeates the entire war. On one side, discipline, order, victory. On the other, inner human dignity, compassion, the desire to preserve one's humanity despite everything. In his gesture lies not only a sign of respect, but also a challenge to the system, which often erases all those who choose to go against the rules for the higher value, life. This moment is not merely a scene of combat. It is the culmination of an inner struggle that defines who we are when fate confronts us face to face with death. Can an act of mercy in wartime become a turning point? Can this gesture change the course of events, give hope where only fear and destruction reign? This is the core question that leaves a deep imprint on the heart of everyone who hears this story. In a world where victory is often measured by blood and devastation, is there still room for salvation, for humanity? Or is war just a ruthless machine that leaves no one a chance? And so, at the end of this dramatic scene, the last and most important question arises. What is more important, victory in battle or losing one's human essence? In this confrontation, in this complex game of fate, each of us is forced to make a choice. And it is this choice, whether to be cruel or to be human, that determines who we will become and what legacy we will leave behind. Within this story, which seems merely an episode of war, lies the greatest lesson. Even in the darkest times, there is room for light, and even in the most brutal battles, for mercy, because ultimately, it is mercy that is the true weapon capable of changing the world. Under the shadow of the endless sky, beneath the roaring echoes of war, faith in humanity often perishes. In this chaos where death and destruction seem to be the only reality, there are stories capable of awakening something greater, a spark of hope that can ignite brighter than any explosion. One such story is the fate of Franz Stigler, a man whose life and actions became a symbol of absolute valor, unbreakable principles, and the possibility of remaining human, even in the most ruthless conditions. His story is not just a tale of heroism. It is a powerful reminder that even in times of bloody conflict, the human spirit can rise, awaken conscience, and leave behind a legacy that cannot be forgotten. Franz Stigler is a name that hardly resonates in the world of military secrets and covert operations. He was a pilot, serving in aviation, a profession often associated with danger that takes not only health, but also the soul. But his journey was not only about combat flights and strategic missions. During those years, when the fog of war shrouded everything sacred, Stigler demonstrated extraordinary mercy. On one of his missions, he encountered an American crew that had crash-landed deep within enemy territory. The testimonies that have reached us show that he did not hesitate, did not question, nor seek personal gain. He made a decision based on inner morality and human solidarity. In a time when even a suspicion of sympathizing with the enemy could end in death, he, risking his own life, helped, sheltered, saved, and brought someone out from under the enemy's nose. This was his mercy, not just an act of noble gesture, but a profound act of human faith in goodness and the power of compassion. But what happened next? Time passed, and Franz's fate unfolded in an unconventional way. He continued his service, remaining in the shadows, avoiding attention and awards. When the war seemed to be a final victory for dark forces, he made his choice, to stay true to his principles. Soon after the conflict ended, As cold winds of change began to blow across the world, he decided to emigrate to Canada. This step was not merely a desire to start a new life. It was an act of escaping past traumas, the hardships of war, and accusations that could have hung over him. In Canada, he found not only new land, but also a new opportunity, the chance to continue living according to his conscience, unafraid of persecution or oblivion. During the Cold War era, when borders and ideologies divided nations, his decision was a special act of defiance, a protest against the forgetfulness of humanity, which he continued to carry in his heart. It seemed that his story could remain a quiet legend, forgotten in the annals of history. But fate decided otherwise. In the 90s, nearly 2 decades after the war ended, Franz decided to write a letter. His trembling hand, aged and emotional, glided across the paper as he confessed that he was a pilot who had saved an American crew. In this letter, not only an admission but also a cry of the soul, a testament to inner struggle and unspoken feelings, he spoke of his actions, of his mercy, of how even beyond the front lines he remained human. His words, like a quiet but powerful whisper in the silence, conveyed that goodness does not disappear. It remains within each of us, even if war tries to suppress it. Upon learning of the letter, Charlie Brown, one of the crew members saved, decided to find his savior. He traveled to Canada, guided only by intuition and the memory of the day his life was saved. The time that separated them was not only measured in years, but also in the distance between hearts broken by war. The meeting that took place in the 90s became possible only because both men preserved their faith in humanity. In this encounter lies a symbol of reconciliation, an opportunity to forgive and understand that even amid the most brutal conflicts, there is room for compassion and genuine human connection. Franz and Charlie's story is not only about personal heroism, it is about how 2 destinies, linked by bravery and mercy, transcended the boundaries of time and space. Their meeting became a reminder to the entire world. Even in the darkest hours of history, there is a light capable of illuminating the path to peace. In the 1990s, as the political map of the world was once again changing and ideological contradictions came to the forefront, their story reminded us of the importance of humanity, of the need to remember that behind every soldier, there is a person with his own history, pain, and hope. Unfortunately, both heroes passed away before their feats received full recognition. There were no scenes of glory or grand ceremonies in their lives, but their story is something greater. It is a legend that has inspired millions. It carries a lesson about morality, the strength of the human spirit, and the idea that even in times of war, humanity can be preserved. Their example has become a reference point for modern military ethical codes, for intergovernmental dialogues, and for everyone who believes in the power of kind actions. In their deeds lies the embodiment of the ideal that goodness can change not only the fates of individuals, but also history itself. But the main question remains open. Can personal valor, even when demonstrated in wartime, fundamentally change the perception of this conflict? Can a single act, a sincere act of mercy, become the light that dispels darkness? This question continues to trouble the minds of historians, philosophers, and ordinary people, because in its answer lies hope for a future where humanity will triumph over even the darkest forces. It is these stories, like the fate of Franz and Charlie, that remind us that in each of us there is the potential to become a hero if we are willing to choose goodness, even when everything around seems hopeless. And ultimately, how can one random act of mercy transform lives, become a symbol of hope for future generations? How can one person, showing mercy at the most critical moment, change not only his own life, but also leave an eternal legacy that will inspire millions? The answer is simple. True strength lies in the ability to show compassion, in the willingness to be merciful, even in the toughest circumstances. Because it is these acts that make us human, and the stories of Franz and Charlie are a vivid proof of that.